categories. Specifically, we're trending below budget on a year-to-date basis for heavy lift as well as scrap iron wharfage. That right now appears to be more a function of the way in which the budget was spread and more of timing as opposed to really demonstrating an identified shortfall at this time. Additionally, crane hours are trending about 181 hours under budget. The 2019 budget contained 1,000 crane hours, 1,000 revenue generating crane hours. That's a 20% reduction from what the previous 2 years of crane hour utilization was. One of the things that I'm suggesting is looked at over the next several months is that deficit something that is recoverable. Is it more a function of the way the utilization might be spread over the next remaining months? Will those 181 hours be able to come back? We're significantly over budget on the storage and other services line item, and that's entirely the result, or nearly entirely the result of one of our license agreements, which is on a month-to-month basis and purposely was not budgeted, but that's driving most of that $65,000 of revenue. In terms of operating expenses, again,
I'm sorry, do you anticipate that will continue?
The best way to respond to that is if the licensee wishes to discontinue their license agreement with both us and one of our tenants, there's a series of steps that need to be taken, and there's not an indication yet that that's the direction they wish to go in. But because they could, that was the purpose of not budgeting that revenue. OpEx, again, it's primarily timing, and some of these variances will smooth out somewhat throughout the remainder of the year. Probably the largest variance that was not budgeted was some final costs related to the repair of the mobile harbor crane. Those repairs have been completed, the crane is back, and the crane has been returned to service. Any budget variance that we're currently tracking related to payroll, of that $36,000 variance, about $26,000 is, $12,000 of that variance is reimbursable personnel costs that are billed to FMT, and $14,000 is the quarterly adjustment to the vacation accrual liability. The remaining amount, there are a couple of budget lines that at this point in the year is tracking somewhat above budget. Security salaries are trending above budget, and that's related primarily to some activities that occurred during the first quarter that were not anticipated, particularly some of the security costs that were incurred related to the barges coming loose and ultimately having to be brought here in the case of the Rusty Anchor and berthed here for a period of time. The items, starting with the depreciation and other items categories. Yes.
On the professional consulting fees, is that including the work that we're doing with our construction managers?
That is not. That
to be capitalized.
That will be capitalized.
So that's exclusive of those.
That's exclusive. Now, the bulk of those fees are related to the ongoing engineering consulting work for 700 Smith Boulevard. And a portion of those costs, the engineering costs are reimbursable from the previous tenant, but at this time, we can't make the case to capitalize those costs.
I agree.
Yeah, right, it's not
I agree.
it's just expensed. From depreciation and other items, for the most part, these are items that are contractually obligated and there's a set schedule. We are trending under budget for interest expense, and that's more of the timing of our most recent, the timing of the closing of our most recent sublease was subsequent to the budget being adopted, and the structuring of the interest payments were not known at the time the budget was adopted. So that again will carry that variance through, but those three transactions are all guided by an amortization schedule. Interest income, again, as we see inflow of cash primarily from the ESD grant reimbursement. When that grant reimbursement occurs, as the cash flow for our upcoming capital needs is more precisely identified, there is an opportunity to take some of those funds, put them back with our investment advisor, and have that help bolster that revenue source. The remaining items are all items that are prescribed both in the Corning Preserve bond transaction and our agreement with the city. Again, the agreement with the city that's trending under budget because the variables related to that agreement are determined, specifically non-homestead tax rate is determined subsequent to the adoption of our budget. So we'll have a modest positive budget variance on that line through the end of the year. And so really what I believe the focus will be from this point going through the end of the year is, continue to work on the items that have been identified now for April 30th that I mentioned, and it'll, through coordination with Bill Ring and getting a sense of some of the timing and some of the cargo that could be coming in for the remaining piece of the month, and really zero in on those events driving the rolling forecast going forward.
So, I'm sorry, what you're saying, if I'm understanding correctly, you're saying the dockage and mortgage fees, you think that some of that might be more timing, or we may make that up, but that the crane is really something that we need to look at.
Well, I think they all need to be looked at specifically during the first 4 months. It is timing, and that's a combination of both the manner in which the budget was spread, but also, for example, we make certain budget assumptions both in the size of the underlying variables that generate the revenue. So specifically with dockage, what we've found is the limited heavy lift activity that's occurred during the first 4 months, it just happened to be for a shorter duration than in terms of the length of stay.
Yep.
So the budget carries, 2+ days, and we, that average was down by about half so far.
Yeah.
Now that's offset, just for example, the fact that our new wood pulp customer has been using vessels that are larger in NRTs, net registered tons, than what our previous customers or what our existing pulp customers had used. So again, that offsets some of that there, but the I think the task is really to continue to work with Tony and Bill, get a sense of what the potential activity is going forward, and then convert that into projectable events.
But that's something we've been really asking for a while, and that's the forecasting, these
That's right.
indicator issues.
Exactly right.
And as you get more and more into the year, it gets a little more certainty
Right.
of who your customers are gonna be. I think it's something that we need to continue to emphasize, the value of that for reporting to us back on budget variances.
And all I was saying, George, on the crane piece, and the reason I was emphasizing that is, you know, if it turns out that the cargo coming in just appears to, you know, will not be a heavy utilizer, those crane hours, then I think that deficit becomes a little more precise. But even going into the year, there was a contingency baked into the number of hours budgeted. It just may now be turning out to be not a large enough contingency.
Any other questions for Eric? Okay, so we'll discuss this again, the June meeting, to see May and sort of the next 6 months, and how we're looking for the rest of the year.
So I think we discussed, we actually would ask that it be prepared,
Yes.
so that we're actually looking for what that forecast is gonna be and really what that outcome might be.
Yeah.
Right, that this be a specific item on the agenda. Right, with the budget that was put together, as well as the amount, the anticipated vessels for the rest of the year, and where those differences are. Sorry, I'm looking at you, and I know it won't be you, but I'm just,
That's why he's smiling.
I know.
I'm not in my head, yeah. I agree.
Yeah, right, yeah.
So one of the things, you know, we're on somewhat of a shorter cycle this month, so we're still continuing, you know, the bulk of the April activity's been captured. I've been and will continue to work very closely with Lynn on a going forward basis, and, you know, we'll end this meeting and we'll move, you know, basically right into the work necessary to generate that forecast for next month.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm hanging up. Okay. All right, so Rich is now going to give us an update.
Thank you. To start with this morning, this morning I attended a wake service for a former longshoreman who was one of the original founding members of the Albany Maritime Ministry, former Assistant District Attorney George Barber. And of course, within the last month, we've lost 2 other volunteers at the ministry, Marilyn Walker, and suddenly last Tuesday, Reverend Hempel's wife passed away. So the ministry's had a tough month, but the board was represented at all 3 of those wake functions. They were dedicated people to serving down here, and the families certainly appreciated the support. Pat and I met with Hakeem Hoke and Tom McPeters about a month ago. We had a great discussion with them, and we both plan to attend the A Village meeting Thursday evening, the 16th. They offered us an opportunity to come and just give an update as to what is going on at the port with all of the items that have been in the news, and we plan to just keep the discussion moving on that. We have a meeting this Thursday at 11 a.m. with McLaren Engineering and BBL to continue the discussion on the planning of the new warehouse. It was originally scheduled for yesterday, but we had some scheduling conflicts and had to put it off until Thursday morning at 11. Correct? 11. The 80-acre parcel in Bethlehem is still moving along in a positive way through the seeker process. We had conference calls last week with our engineers, McFarland Johnson, and representatives from the town as to how the process will go, and how, because of the volumes of information Some will be submitted in an ongoing basis. The clock doesn't start ticking until all of the items have been submitted, but just to give the members out there a chance to read through some of the information, our engineers submitting it piecemeal. I'm working with the Albany and Troy Fire Departments on a port security grant. I'll give you more information on that later on. Last month, there was an international partnering forum held in New York City for the offshore wind energy. There was a lot of, it was the largest attended forum that the people involved in offshore have hosted since the move started. There's a follow-up meeting in June in Boston to that, and again, we just there's a lot of momentum. We're getting a lot of interest from people as they see that we have been shortlisted on the 4 ports in New York State that are capable of handling the offshore. I will also, for onshore wind, be attending the American Wind Energy Conference next week. Bill Ring will be there. Also, we're hoping to find out a little more information and possibly draw more projects to our port that are rumored to be 3rd and 4th quarter of 2019. Last Friday, Tom McGinnis retired as our IT director. In the interim, just so there was no loss of technology capabilities, we've contracted with Tech2 through a 6-month contract. So far, the workings have been seamless and very effective. We've already continued on intercepting emails that are meant to harm the system. Tom had a log of intercepts that I apologize I didn't bring with me today, but he had presented a log of intercepts that he had been monitoring throughout the course of this year, and I had intended to present it last month, and then I forgot to bring it with me today. Some good news. The last month there was that incident at Callanan where a worker was injured. I worked closely with the management down there just to assist the family in any way we could. The employee has been moved from Albany Medical Center. He's at Sunnyvale, and I spoke with Jim Malacqua this morning. He's actually excited and looking forward to getting back to work. So it's a great recovery and good news that he's doing so well down there. That's it for right now.
Do you mind if I add, we had the Hudson Valley Community College president and his leadership team came and had a great meeting with us, and a couple of businesses that were able to join and did a tour of the port, and it was a phenomenal discussion, and you know, even already connected one of the companies with the leadership team that may have some employees that the company needed, so that was sort of cool to see in action.
Thank you.
Rich or Megan, for some of the documents or deliverables that the consultants are putting together for studies on these projects, can they be put into a Dropbox for board members so we can access those digital documents?
I think, yes, absolutely, but I think we can also easily link where they're being put into a Dropbox on a public forum at the town of Bethlehem. One way or another, we'll get you that link.
Well, I guess I'm looking at it more broadly. For
Even
other
more
digital
else.
documents, it might be helpful to just have a board we do that for our board, and then we dump stuff into it on a Dropbox. It's easier than email and stuff with large files and things of that nature. If that's doable, it would be
Yeah, and even
helpful.
some of the maps, right, that we
Yeah.
refer to, of the 80 acres.
Okay. So not just the expansion, but you're also saying on the warehouse work? You know, the other thing too is that our maintenance team actually has sort of built a road into the 80 acres. If you ever wanted to, I don't know that you all have driven in there, if you ever wanted to have us drive you in and go around to see it, we could do that.
Seems wearing long pants.
Don't get out
We'll
of
send the
the
drone down.
Yeah.
It's very cool though, it's really interesting when you're there, it's like you're in the middle of nowhere, but in a good way.
Any questions for Rich? All right, so, since a lot of what we were talking about was the ships year to date, as well as future ships, I'll turn it over to Tony for a report.
Thank you, Chairman. We'll cover the overall business conditions or leading indicators on a micro, or taking a look at 30,000 feet, or micro trench in the trenches. Tariffs. Tariffs have been increased from 10 to 25%, and we do not handle containers here, so the impact will not be felt from a containerization standpoint on the West Coast for 14 days, and on the East Coast in New York for about 30 days. No one can predict what's going to happen. How it'll affect us, I'll cover that a little bit later. Things going on up at 30,000 feet. Power generation manufacturers. The one in the United States here, locally, in Schenectady, they're going through changes and they're moving forward. It's predicted that 20 and 21 will be better than 2019 is going to be. The other company, European company, in the power generation construction equipment, they are in the process of divesting themselves or restructuring their $30 billion power generation business. So both of the big companies in the world are in the process of changing and adapting to new, different business conditions. From the EPC, engineering, procurement, and construction company standpoint, the two big ones were down in Texas. One is privately held and the other one is publicly traded. The publicly traded company just announced first quarter loss of $28 million. So they are going through some interesting times now. Looking overall at the ocean carrier, the specialized ocean carrier standpoint, the carriers who call here at the port, a relatively newcomer, 2014, has absorbed two of the other major players. And now they've acquired or put together about 80 ships. They're looking to have 100. And the biggest player has 180. But what's going on, a lot of the other carriers, was just down in New Orleans at a breakbulk conference. They're partnering. One comment, if it wasn't for the wind energy business from China to Spain, they would be in real deep straits. So that's a look from up top. Down in the trenches, micro, through April of this year, or last year, we handled 13 ships and barges. This year, 7, a reduction of 6. And where is that? 4 in the heavy lift projects, cargo sector, and 2 in the scrap sector. As Eric mentioned, a lot of that, like with the scrap, that varies. So we see 3 versus 1. Tonnage was 94,000 tons approximately for the first 4 months, and now it's 45. Where's the reduction? About 4,500 tons in the heavy lift project area, and 41,000 in scrap, as mentioned. So that varies. Last year we had the Cricket Valley and the Fairview project in Johnstown, VA. So those were large projects, and we don't have one or any that have taken their place. The one that we were looking at in Ohio, as mentioned in previous meetings, ran into litigation, and it looks like it's been moved to 2020 before we see anything. We'll see smaller shipments through towards the end of the year. There's, in the fourth quarter, on the horizon, there's a project we are working on in northeastern Pennsylvania, and the product is coming from India. A lot of the product comes from China, so this is the comment about tariffs. The tariff situation, if it still exists at that point in time, we won't be affected from that standpoint. Then there's another major project in 2020 in north central Ohio. Another one I mentioned earlier in southeast Ohio. So we have some larger projects looking like they'll take off next year. Longshore hours, first 4 months, within 52 hours of one another, 10,200. So the terminal work is continuing. On a bright spot, forest products. We're about 17,800 tons so far this year versus 97. The ships have, let's see, about 4,500 tons, the two ships last year. This year, it's around 6,000 tons on each ship. So that new business for the wood pulp is working out. Also, within that forest products sector, we're looking at securing some other commodities within that and working on that. So hopefully that works out, some lumber and some liner board. And that's basically it. Any questions?
When you said the project in Ohio that you anticipate being 2020, are those ones that are already a guarantee to come to us should they move forward, or is that still?
Well, we handled the first one. We were able to work and handle the first one. The second one, we are the front runner. When it was done in Jacksonville in January, spoke with the company who's handling it. We are still the front runner, but a couple of ports are throwing their hats in and becoming more aggressive. So we maintain contact with them. I'll be down in Jacksonville next month meeting with those folks. So we'll see where we stand. We keep in touch with them in the meantime. And no more questions. If I may pass out the AJOT, the American Journal of Transportation. It's one of the two major publications we advertise in, focusing on our markets. This particularly, the American Journal of Transportation, focuses on not only supply chain, logistics, containers, break bulk, and heavy lift project cargo, covers the whole spectrum. The other one focuses only on heavy lift project cargo. All they sent were 10 guys. And in there's an article on page 6 that covers the Port of Albany. Page 6, 7, and 12. Our ad is on page 8. And this has a substantial circulation, about 40,000.
And online as well.
Big pardon?
Online as well.
Online, right.
Looks like they precisely captured all the different pieces
Yeah, Matt,
of
that's a
expansion
good
we're
guy.
looking to do.
Known him for years.
That's great.
And we've advertised in AJOT for many years, going back into the 90s, because they are the best from the standpoint of the markets we're looking to.
What do they charge for an ad, Tom?
Big pardon?
What do they charge for an ad?
$4,500. No, wait, let's see, we get, AJOT is, we get 6 ads, and 5 we pay for, 1 we get free, and it's around 12,000 a year.
For you.
Now, did you pitch them, did we pitch them, or they have just been?
Well,
hearing
AJOT,
from
we've
you?
had a long-standing relationship with them. Bill Bourbon, the publisher, I know well, and the speakers, or the writer, and then Brendan Dugan, who works on the advertising, comes up to our Port Industry Day, and they're looking. Rich and I have had conversations with their writers in the past and have gotten articles, but this is the most concise and expansive that has been put together. Megan had a long conversation with him also.
Thank you for sharing. Any questions for Tony? Other business? I know we have Port Industry Day after other business, so is there anything besides Port Industry Day?
Looks like everybody's got their J-COPE submissions in. I'm gonna follow up with 2 of you, I believe, that had submitted but didn't hear back, so I'll follow up with J-COPE directly. If they won't give me an answer, you might have to follow up on your own, if they are secretive about that
Given the
process.
public information.
Yeah, exactly. It's public after the fact.
Right, right. So they're due
Tomorrow. So after this,
I'll
I'll
go back and check my dashboard. and
check
make
your
sure.
dashboard, see how much.
All right, so Port Industry Day is June 13th.
Yes,
We have a new location, I hear.
we're going to hold it inside the Dagan warehouse to highlight the effects of the expansion and the Tiger grant, and to show the people attending what it is that we've been talking about for several years, about the heavy loads that we handle. We've got a good speaker coming, Mark Lockwood, who is been involved in the heavy lift and project cargo business for years with Walston and Frock. He'll be the guest speaker. We're still working on a couple others. I just received word this morning that the mayor will be down. She has a conflict in her schedule, but will be here a little after 1 o'clock to give a few words.
And nice article today in the Business Review about our big
Yeah, great
cargo
article.
we just moved.
Yeah, and that hopefully we'll get a lot of people that receive the save the date thing to get them interested in signing up to come down. Because yeah, that article hit on all cylinders with interviews from GE, Dagan, and the port with the size of the piece that was moved Sunday during the was loaded Sunday evening.
Any questions about Port Industry Day or anything else? So I think we have a need to go into executive session.
Yeah, we have a couple.
For the discussion of the sale of property as well as some staffing.
Yes.
Move that we move into executive session for the purpose of discussing staffing and the other item that you mentioned.
Purchase of properties. Second? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so do you want to do the property stuff first and then ask staff, please?
Hang on one second, please. Okay.
All right, so just for the record, there was no action taken in executive session. Our next meeting is Wednesday, June 19th at 12:30. And if there's no other business, I'll take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.